Thank you, Lucille, for introduction. I would like to speak on Euromaidan events, which I witnessed. And the topic of my speech is a need for Ukrainians, Euromaidan in the perspective of Ukraine self-definition. And speaking on Euromaidan, I want our talk to be friendly and sincere. I appreciate all your comments, all your questions. I will try to answer them. I know most of you shared the emotions that were dominant during Euromaidan in its different periods. Our joint project, Contemporary Ukraine Research Forum, proved it. From the both sides of ocean, we felt common emotional involvement into the events that started a year ago. Our video conferences created the mental space to enable the mutual dialogue between the countries. Frankly speaking, I've avoided speaking on Euromaidan on public. This is something which has not finished yet because the war is going on in eastern Ukraine, which is why it's difficult to reflect on this phenomenon. In addition, I would like to say that it's a very traumatic experience for each Ukrainian and for those who have connection with Ukraine. Before my visit to Edmonton, I've talked to my friends to find out public opinion, and the question was, what do you think should I tell my audience on Euromaidan? What is the most significant and most interesting about this phenomenon? There were different thoughts, but the most common answer was, tell your audience as it was, and tell them the whole truth, and say that it was a great experience to share. Of course, I could not tell you the truth because everyone has his or her own truth. It's not easy to speak on Euromaidan because it is not a homogeneous phenomenon. Great experience to share, yeah, but this word great does not reflect the variety of those emotions that were dominant during the Euromaidan. In the beginning, Maidan was a kind of Apollonial carnival. The young people enjoyed themselves, sang songs, had a good time on the main square of Ukraine, and had their hopes and dreams for the better life. This period continued from the 21st of November till 30th November, when the students were cruelly beaten by Berkut, the state riot police. My friend posted on Facebook, when we started revolution, we had only tea, a box of sweets, but then when we have started it, it was difficult to finish, to stop. Of course, it's a joke, but it reflects the whole mood of this first period of Euromaidan. The second period was a time of people's mobilization. The other people joined the students because they had this feeling of injustice. People from the other regions of Ukraine came to Kyiv to support the Maidaners, people on Maidan. And Maidan lived its life, and people gathered each Sunday. This event was called Vichya. I will explain what Vichya is. It is a meeting in the medieval Kievan Rus where the vital questions for the country were solved. Yeah? Did Russians who claim themselves the descendants of the Kievan Rus have Vichya? Hard to imagine. Maidan could be compared also to Agora, a place of meeting in the ancient Greece, where the vital questions were placed on the agenda and solved. Perhaps it was the most tragic period, as it resulted in killing hundreds of people. It began on the 1st December and ended on 22nd February, the day of mass murders and flee of former, thanks God, President Yanukovych from our country. Now hard to believe that several hundred people were killed in the 21st century just for nothing in the main square of one of the European countries. I would like to say that recent events in Ukraine have greatly changed the people. They changed the way how we think of ourselves and how we present ourselves. We are not those Ukrainians we were before Euromaidan. We feel our Ukrainness, that is a specific term I would like to provide, which means the feeling the connection to Ukraine. So we feel our Ukrainians in a completely different way. I'm not speaking for all the Ukrainians, but for its majority. There were also people in Kyiv who enjoyed their cappuccino, latte, tea, whatever, in some 100 meters from Maidan Nезалежності, Independence Square, when hundreds of people were killed. Could you imagine that? Absolutely a postmodernist situation. Postmodernism hardly came to our literature, but it completely came to our lives. One provides the self-definition through differentiation. Geographically, Ukraine is a physical border between Europe and Russia. Additionally, it also can be considered a mental border, which separates two worlds, conservative and authoritarian Russian world and the democratic Europe. In the 1920s, Mykola Poliukhovych, a prominent Ukrainian writer and political leader of his generation, had courage to proclaim slogan, "Away from Moscow, towards Europe." These words were said when Ukraine was absent on the world map. Nowadays, when Ukraine is presented in geographical terms, Poliuchovych's slogan is interpreted in that sense that nobody gives us Europe, and Europe does not give us anything, except its endless concerns about Ukrainian situation. We Ukrainians are Europe. We are Europeans mentally. And now we are on our way to become a political state in European terms, not only in geographical ones. Taras Lutый, who is my teacher, Ukrainian philosopher, proclaims, "We have initiated Euromaidan in search for Europe, and then we have found Ukraine." Europeans were deeply astonished by the fact that Maidan continued during the severe winter and that the Ukrainians stayed on Maidan during the cold and frost, and winter in Kyiv is much more severe than in West Europe, and they were deeply astonished by this fact. The joy of the Euromaidan revolution was overshadowed by the deaths of hundreds of people, as well as the consequences of the Maidan, Russian annexation of Crimea and the war in eastern Ukraine. Despite the tragic events, Maidan created an appropriate ground for the self-definition. In a deep crisis, we can see who we are more clearly. During Maidan events, the Ukrainians faced a direct question, who we are and where we head. Paradoxically, Ukraine emerged from the crisis with a stronger sense of national identity. How we feel our Ukrainianness or our belonging to Ukraine, as I have said, is one of the most meaningful and crucial for Ukrainians, especially now when we face with the utter threat which undermines the sense of our national belonging. The aggressive foreign policy of Russia aims to weaken the sense of our national belonging, trying to prove to themselves, to Ukrainians, and to the whole world that we are the part of so-called Russian world. Here, Russian world is in inverted commas. These games are taking place due to the information war against Ukraine, as well as due to the real war in eastern Ukraine. I don't speak here for the whole Russia. There are many worthy people there. Speaking of Russia, I mean Kremlin policy and dozens of its adherents. They claim to us who we are and where we headed. Playing upon the identity games and taking advantage of uncertain identity of Ukrainians, as well as from the political crisis. They try to maintain their version of history by telling us who we are. In his recent book on Ukrainian crisis, Andrew Wilson states that the post-Soviet countries define themselves through Russia. Here I would like to add that they defined themselves through their attitude to Russia. Here I mean Russia as a direct descendant of the USSR. I'm only in that meaning. After Maidan, Ukraine became a target of conservative values campaign aimed to define so-called real Russia, here also in inverted comma, to legitimize its politics in near abroad. Russian imperial nationalism reveals its power in the oppression of other nations. Ukraine became a target of the Russian meta-narrative of Putin's new politics, Russian world. Our contemporary Ukraine is born out of a profound political crisis. Under Russian aggression, we maintain our self-definition as Ukrainians, providing our sense of belonging to the nation Russia attempts to undermine. And Russia takes advantage from this situation. Before the gaining of independence, Ukrainians did not have an experience to be Ukrainians. And in fact, Ukraine got independence due to the Soviet collapse. During the referendum in December of 1991, 91% of Ukrainians voted for independence. Before that, all of them were the USSR citizens or Soviet Ukraine citizens, if you like that. And after they became Ukrainian citizens. And Applebaum asserts, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Ukraine was filled with the people who did not have idea of their national identity. What does it mean to be Ukrainian? I can assure you that we know now it much better. Independence is not something ultimately given. After 1991, our Ukrainians was not a gift. Freedom needs to be proved many times, and we have to exercise in freedom, in its maintaining. And we had to do it in November last year. Now I would like to concentrate upon the question, why did Maidan emerge? The tradition of so-called Maidans is deeply rooted in Ukrainian culture, as many of you may know. Speaking about the independent Ukraine, the original Maidan took place in 2004 during the Orange Revolution. In 1990, it was occupied by student protesters who struggled for independence of Ukraine. If you look into history, Maidan was a tradition of Cossacks and Sich, those male people, half of military organization who wanted to see Ukraine as a state, not as a part of empires. For this reason, the Cossacks have to deal with the neighbor states, which often use them in their own interest. The Euromaidan events started on 21st November, when Ukrainian government suddenly dropped its plans to sign the association agreement with European Union. The main feature of Maidan events is regarded in spontaneity, but the best spontaneous things should be prepared first. People were ready to start Maidan, especially young generation, who had a memory of 2004 Orange Revolution. We had very warm memories of it despite the disappointment afterwards. When the Euromaidan events began, my mother noted that my generation is spoiled by revolutions. It's true. After so-called Orange Revolution, it was a natural thing to go to Maidan. When I'm speaking of Orange Revolution, the students of the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy were one of the first to support this revolution. As for people, why did they came to Maidan? The common answer was distali, which can be translated as "we are fed up with this." People came to Maidan to protest against the system, everyday consequences of which everyone could feel. It was protest against the criminal system and Yanukovych, who was a symbol of it. And we just wanted to live in a normal society. Why did hundreds of thousands of people go to the main square of Kyiv? Some myths were arranged around this question. The first myth is the myth of Europe. Initially, the events were named as Euromaidan Europe, but Europe was not something that we were looking for. The Ukrainians realized it much later with the development of the events, and this became a marker of our self-definition of our Ukrainians. That is the first conclusion from the Maidan events. The second myth, born and maintained mainly by Russian propaganda, that's there were only nationalists or mainly nationalists on Maidan. If it really was in such way, how could you explain that Svoboda party, the main nationalist party, did not enter the parliament after the elections? People did not want any ideology, but they were driven by a desire for direct action. And here is also interesting phenomenon, where connected with the notion of nationalism. The old interpretations of which we're trying to withdraw now. So we don't interpret nationalism in the frameworks of the Soviet ideology. Maidan emerged and stood in the severest frost because we had sense of our common family. We shared common values and beliefs. The Maidan events often called the revolution of dignity. In fact, I don't really like the pathos of these words. Maidan, but that's the definition we have now. And now I would like to move to the consequences of Euromaidan, Crimea and Eastern Europe. The Euromaidan events could not be regarded separately from Russia's annexation of Crimea and war in eastern Ukraine, which are direct consequences of the Ukrainians' attempt of self-definition. Here I would like to speak on the question of language a little bit. Undoubtedly, Ukrainian language is a part of our Ukrainians, but it is not the only marker of it. As a big brother, Russia could not help standing aside the Ukrainian political situation, and it did not forgive Ukraine that Yanukovych left. The restoration of so-called Russian world, in inverted commas, is based on language principle, right? The Russian world is here where people speak Russian. Like in Orwell's novel, 1984, language is a meaning of control and power. It includes also the manipulation of meaning. Putin did not consider that the conscience of two nations is different. Ukrainians and Russians are different. And this difference was greatly seen during the Euromaidan's events. Here is the problem, because the majority of Ukrainians are bilingual. Many people who were on Maidan spoke Russian, but identify themselves as Ukrainians. Timothy Snyder once said, as the joke goes, Ukraine is a country where people speak Russian, while Russia is a country where people stay quiet in Russian. Yeah? Thus the question is not only the factor of Ukrainian self-definition. And here, the other examples can be brought, and Canada is among them. Yeah. Eastern Ukraine is regarded as a problematic region in geopolitical sense. Its main feature is that the majority of its residents are of pro-Russian orientation. I would say that much more of pro-Soviet orientation, not pro-Russian. These people have a strong nostalgia for the Soviet times. Russia claims its version of history based on the presumption that Ukraine is not a country, is not a state. Russia's version of history serves politics and Kremlin's interests. Generally, history serves the ideological underpinning of today's Russia. And here past is the key. Russia plays on people with the Soviet background. And due to Ukraine's complicated history, Ukrainian identity is overwhelmed and can be interpreted in many different ways. After the last events, we have got a better sense of our Ukrainians. For us, to identify our belonging is a crucial issue today. In order not to become a target of empires, powers exercising in chauvinist, authoritarian, totalitarian ideologies, we must say to ourselves and to the world who we are. The answer is clear. The idea of Ukraine itself should play a role of mobilization around the idea of nation, not to get swallowed by the other country. In her article, nationalism is exactly what Ukraine needs now, and Applebaum claims that democracy fails when citizens don't believe their country is worth fighting for. Euromaidan proved that Ukraine is worth to struggle for. We gain the sense of our national belonging in extremely difficult times. Nevertheless, we feel common mental field with past generations. Those deeds we continue. The realization of the need for Ukraine is key, and I think there is no way back. Thank you for your attention. And now I would like to demonstrate you a little video which expresses in some way the mood of Maidan.